Okay, so today I'm here with
Moshe Schwartzberg.
Moshe Schwartzberg. And you do?
I run a company that does private label manufacturing and just creates private label food brands.
But mainly you do marketing, branding, and those type of fun stuff, right? Am I correct in that? Or
That is correct. So marketing is my passion. Marketing drives everything that I do. I happen to find myself in a position right now that deals with a lot of different logistics, a lot of different pieces of helping run a company. But marketing is my MO. That's what drives me at the core.
right,
So.
because I knew you through the social media world as a marketer initially, and we've been in contact on WhatsApp here and there, and I like your thoughts and ideas in terms of marketing. So just take me a step back into where you started. Like, let's go all the way back to the beginning. Let's start from there. Where'd you grow up?
Sure. So I grew up in Flatbush. I grew up
At a nice out-of-town community. I'm going to keep using that line as long as I can, right?
It's funny because I grew up on Enemies Third. So every time I tell people I'm from Flatbush and they say, "Where are you from?" I say I grew up on Enemies Third. They're like, "It's not really Flatbush."
Doesn't count.
So
it's not hardcore Flatbush.
It technically works calling
It's
it
an out-of-town community, right?
So I grew up there. I went to Berlin for elementary school. Then I went to the Mir for high school, and then I was in Lakewood for a short stint, and then I basically went to Chofetz Chaim for most of my Beis Medrash years. Chofetz Chaim at Cherry Hill, Chofetz Chaim in Eretz Yisrael, and then I came back in about November of 2019. I went to Rabbi Zucker's yeshiva in Flatbush, and then from there is really where my marketing journey started.
Yeah, and that's the best. This is the most interesting part, and I ask this to everyone that I interview pretty much. I love to understand how people got from being, in the yeshiva experience to where they got today, because I feel like so many people, that's useful information for many people. So you're in Rabbi Zucker's yeshiva, married. Before you were married, you got into it?
This was before I was married. I was 21 at the time.
Okay.
I just got back from Eretz Yisrael. So I went to Rabbi Zucker's yeshiva, and I was just full-time yeshiva after Eretz Yisrael. And I always had an interest in marketing. I always liked it. I was always intrigued by it, but I didn't really know much about it. And I remember seeing I was on Instagram, and I saw that the Zusha band had posted a flyer. They were looking for an intern, a marketing intern.
That's funny.
Now, I knew nothing about marketing, but I was like, I figured I'd reach out. And I reached out and get a response, but I was like, I want this internship. Like, I love the Zusha guys. I want this marketing internship. So I had a very good contact that I felt like could pull me in. I happen to know Alex Clare.
Oh, okay.
So
how do you happen to know him? Am I allowed to ask?
I got to know him in Israel, and I had
That's
a chavrusa shop with him. We would learn Tanya together. So when I was in Israel basically for about a year and a half. And when I was there, we would learn together, and I had a relationship with him.
How do you get a relationship with someone like that?
To be honest,
You just walked up to him in the shul? You were in the Shiblach in Beis Yisrael? Like, what happened?
I first ran into him literally. I was jogging, and
it's a good story.
Yeah,
you ran into Alex Lair. Yeah, okay.
I ran into him.
That's one way of doing it. It's like the classic cartoon, New Yorker cartoon. Okay.
It's true. Yeah, it was very like
you knocked him over while jogging in Israel.
Yeah,
and it's love at first sight. The rest is history.
Yeah, it was interesting. Yeah. It was interesting way of putting it, but in a sense, I ran into him. I used to run a lot down by the Shuk area. I had that was my route, and I ran to him, and I was like, "Oh, Alex, I just want to let you know I love your music, and I love everything you're about." And I always like doing that. Like, I think it's no matter how many times someone hears it, I know it means something. So he's like, "Oh, that's really nice." He's like, "Tell me, like, what are you doing in Israel?" This, and I said, we started schmoozing. And he's like, "Oh, come walk with me." And we ended up schmoozing for a bit. I said to him, I'm like, I don't know why. I just like, would you want to like learn together? He got back to me and he was like, "Yeah, let's learn together." So we started learning together. We started doing Tanya. We went through a considerable amount. It was over like a year and change span. And I built a really good relationship with Alex. He's an amazing person. He's taught me a lot, and he's really just to see the way his brain works and see the way he operates.
Yeah, I'd love to know more about how his brain works. One of these days we'll pull him in here. Now
yeah,
I have
for
the connection.
Sure.
Okay.
He's got endless to share. So I basically when I saw this internship, I messaged Alex and I said, "I think you could put a word in for me." And he's like, "Sure." So he messaged the manager of Zusha, a great guy named Paltiel Ratzenberg, and he said, you know, he vouched for me. And like within a few minutes later, I got a message back. He's like, oh, Alex told me about you, you know, let's talk. And we jumped on a call, and then I went in person. They basically gave me the internship. It was me and another guy at the time. There was another guy. He was like in a similar type of stage of life. He was in college. So we both started, and they gave me, you know, different tasks like, you know, running social media and, you know, all sorts of intern type of things. It was, you know, just being on set with them and helping them with whatever different marketing.
What year was this again? Remember?
This was 2019. This was like December of 2019.
So they were still, like, they weren't that big yet at that point. They were known, but they were not. I think they blew up a lot more. No, in the last 5 years.
Yeah, for sure. They were like a different place. I think they had a very strong appeal in the hipster community and like the modern Orthodox community, but I don't think they had like really found their footing in like the Frumvelt. Like I think that only happened post Thank You and all of that.
Interesting. Okay.
So they had that kind of appeal. I remember they were doing like shows in downtown Brooklyn. I joined them on their college tour. There was someone who arranged a college tour for them, which was very interesting.
It's very cool.
So it was a great time. I did it for like a year. Did through COVID, which was also interesting. And from there, like I loved it. I was like, okay, like marketing is what I want to do. And I was constantly like brainstorming and thinking about different ways that I could like really.
Were you involved in any like the art, the music videos, the covers, album covers, any of that type of stuff? I know the woman who did their art, who still does their art.
She's amazing.
What's her name again?
Anita,
Yeah, Anita
Sobel? Yeah.
Anita Sobel, right. She's really talented. And that's like the perfect match.
Yeah.
You know, her vibes, her energy and that stuff. So really cool. So basically you bump into Alex Clare, you get a chavrus that ends up vouching for your internship at Zusha. Zisha or Zusha?
Zusha.
Zusha. And what happens from there?
So actually, in that period of time, I decided that I wanted to go and get my marketing degree as well. I wanted to get an MBA. It was basically March of 2020 when I decided it, because Zerkers has a close relationship with Seton Hall, which is an MBA program, and I had to make a decision if I wanted to do it, and I decided I was going to do it. And so I started an MBA program in March of 2020, and I was doing that, and then I continued my internship, and then I finished my internship. Just about a year or so. I continued school, and then I got an opportunity to do another internship, which was very short, which was basically a sports marketing internship where I was essentially pairing up small brands with athlete events, where it was basically.
Who did you do that for? A Jewish company, non-Jewish company? What was that for?
I did it for a fellow named Eli Lunzer.
Sounds very, very familiar. Okay.
I think it's Eli Lunzer, maybe. I think that's his name. Yeah. So I did it for him, and then it was very short. It was basically like you would find the brands, and then you would.
Didn't Nachi Gordon also do something like this? Some type of sports marketing internship thing? It's
something maybe more from an agent standpoint.
Maybe that's what it was.
He was dealing more at that, I think, or maybe that's what he was going to go into, or.
Okay, so you're starting to do some like influencer, promotional event marketing, that type of stuff.
Yeah.
In
some capacity, I guess it was that, and then I did that just for a little bit, and I dealt with like one event. It was mostly just essentially like selling promotion opportunities. It's like, oh, we can have your product featured at the NFL draft party, or have it featured at the ESPYs. So I was influencer in some capacity, but it was more of just like trying to fill a slot.
Right.
So I did that for a little bit, and then I left that, and then I basically just continued school. I continued my time in yeshiva, and then I did that up until January of 2022, where I was like, okay, it's time to finally go to work, and I got my first like full-time job, which was just marketing at a home care company. And
what did you do?
What I thought I was going to do marketing.
Right.
Was essentially basically whatever the company needed, which was a very small company, and they needed like a lot of hands on deck for different things. So I was basically involved with calling up patients for billing insurance. I was putting up posts on Indeed to recruit nurses. I was basically.
I like that stuff. I think that's the best. It's like a lot of people start off. Part of the reason why I have this podcast is I'm talking to founders or people who started businesses, or just people working. And I think there's a lot of illusions, in general in the world, and like you got a degree and you march into something. And I like hearing the stories, like you're saying, of people who took risks, just bumped into someone, just asked a question, and one thing leads to another thing. And it's not what you know, it's who you know and how hard you push that. And then starting off at something where you're a schlepper, essentially, you're doing anything, whatever it is, but you're learning so much on the job and it's so valuable. And it shouldn't be, you shouldn't that's the way to do it. That's very normal in terms of becoming a business person. And I think it's important for people to note that. My little educational plug over there.
I believe it 100% through. I think for some reason there's some sort of like a disconnect with a lot of people. Like I think you see this with anybody who's in a position, and I get it that they can sometimes become this way because of maybe a multitude of experiences, but let's say you have someone who's in let's say a CEO position or a real decision maker position, and then they'll have someone who's really starting out and they'll approach them, sometimes it could be from a selling standpoint, and they develop a disconnect where they forget that they were in that same position, and there's like it's like just afford him the time, just like, you would have wanted to be afforded the time, and give him his shot or give them their time. But that's...
Yeah, I was saying it more from the other direction, that people walk into a company and they expect to be a CEO, on day 3 because they have a degree or whatever it is. But it goes in both directions, and it's also true.
Right.
It goes both ways. Okay, cool. So you're at this company, you're hustling, you're learning about how to hire people in sales and all the above. And then where did we go from there?
So I did that for just a short bit. I did that until an opportunity came up for me to get a role at Bottom Line Marketing Group.
Oh, interesting. So you started with Saflis, with Bottom Line.
Yeah, I
Okay.
started it,
Started at the bottom line. Yeah, okay.
Started at the bottom, but he's really like Yitzchak Saflis is a master class. So I started there. That was in June of 2022. I also got married the same month, so I started there, and I was hired as a marketing coordinator, and that was like my real first marketing job, and it was amazing. It was a classic agency
they do
role.
Great work, sure.
Really good stuff, and also Yitzchak was at the forefront of the from marketing scene, so he gave me like a real understanding of everything, and like he was not only a boss but a mentor. So because I came in like when I thought I knew marketing, like I developed a little college brain because I was in college, pursuing my MBA and going through these classes, and I'm very much like I improvement focused, and I want to be good. I want to be the best at what at what I can be. And I come in, I'm like, oh, but in college, I thought like my marketing class said like this and like that, and then I'm realizing in real time that like no, it's completely disconnected, and I'm like, there's so much that you're just learning and like how marketing actually works and everything like that. So,
would you say it's useless? I mean, let me jump into that for a second. I mean, now you're looking back a couple of years. Would you have done it differently? Would you have not gone to college?
It's interesting. It's something I've been thinking about a lot because it's like, I think the especially recently, college is really becoming more and more devalued. I wouldn't say it's useless. I think it works in certain contexts. It works that there's a certain hard work ethic that I'm familiar with. I think there's that. Being able to just sit down and focus.
Right.
Not saying that I couldn't develop that through the motivation of, just developing and building something, but I think there's something to that. I think the credibility factor, I think that's, that I think I've seen as helpful. Would I spend $60K for credibility? I don't know,
Okay.
but it's something, maybe it's a rationalization. Maybe that's what it is.
Right. What about the knowledge? What about what you actually learned?
I think there's only one class that was really, really beneficial. Everything else I could have learned on my own.
Okay, but maybe this forced you to actually sit down and learn it and just go through and figure it out.
I think being pushed against the wall is a pretty good motivator, and one could even say it's a probably better motivator than school. Like if you're pushed against the wall and you have to figure out how to structure pricing,
right?
You're going to figure out Excel. It doesn't make a difference. You'll figure out how to do it, right? You're going to figure out all the formulas you need. As opposed to in school, you're like, I just have to submit this assignment. So I'll check it, now check GPT it, whatever, but there's going to be nothing in your brain. In business, if it's not understood in your head, then you're going to come across as a fraud, whatever you're trying to work out. So there's no kind of faking it in that regard. So I think business is more of a motivator than school in that sense, but Yeah, I think of all my classes. There was one class.
Which one? Which one did you really like? They use it.
So it's called Science of Persuasion.
Oh, interesting. There's a book. There's a guy. Is it based on that book? Persuasion.
Influence.
Influence. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. What's the guy's name? An Italian name or something?
Robert. I can't pronounce his last name.
Yeah.
Robert
It's like Italian. Influence. It's called. That's
Yeah.
a really good book. I read that
It's
book.
incredible. It's
Yeah,
like,
yeah. That guy's. It's like, let's find his name. Cialdini.
Yeah.
I knew it had like Italian. Some Cialdini. Highly recommend that book. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm Muslim. Very much so. I remember when we started the class, the professor said, he's like, I'm going to teach you some things that could be used for good or for bad.
Right.
But
Yeah, I think he writes that in the book also. Yeah.
Right. I think he does write that. He says it's good for bad, but I'm trusting that you'll use it for good. That was the first one we started off with. Then he had us go through Thinking Fast and Slow,
Okay.
and then Made to Stick.
Made to Stick. Oh, also a good one.
So
Yes.
all three fantastic books, and we had to write essentially a glorified book report on all of them, and it followed through the entire semester, and that was probably the most impactful class. The way I look at marketing has everything has stemmed from those three books, and they've like Thinking and Fast and Slow has led me to Alchemy, has led me, which is Rory Sutherland, and then there's then the line, basically that whole line of thinking of like behavioral economics. So there's a lot of influence that I feel that has
branched out from there.
branched off from that particular class.
That's cool. I mean, it's interesting. Sometimes I feel like, look back at an experience, and I was speaking, earlier today with the Mount Sales dude, with Jack, and he was talking about his 90-10 rule. Like 90% of everything is garbage. Like you'll have an experience and you'll say 90% of Instagram is garbage, or 90% of this, and you realize that 90% of almost everything is. If you
Right.
have high expectations, most things are not going to be exceptional. That's why things are exceptional. Like maybe you look back at school and you'll say that 90% of it, I didn't really use that information, only 10%, but that might be very normal in life in general. And if that 10%
Right.
is valuable, then it was helpful for you. I did a degree, like one of these yeshivish online, degrees, but it was important. I got a master's degree in educational leadership, whatever it was. And I also have thought back occasionally, like did I actually, and there was one class which I really liked in terms of group dynamics, how groups form. And so I look back and say, like, that's the only class that I gained anything from. But then my other thought is that generally experiences are that way. That class might be very valuable for you. Maybe that was the basis of your whole marketing approach right now. Just putting that out there.
Right. No, it's interesting. Yeah, I guess it's also, now that you brought up like the 90-10, I guess you never know, not only from an approach standpoint, you never know if that experience caused you to operate differently, right? And that's why you are where you are today, right? Because you were operating, you were in a college program, so you maybe took yourself more seriously, and you were maybe more ambitious. So there could be a secondary.
It's not as black and white. It's not always what's on the surface when we measure it, for better or worse. Okay, so really cool. So you did your college program, you got your first jobs in your home care agency, and I know you ended up in a creative agency. So is there something in between, or we jump right over?
Sure. So I was in Bottom Line, which
Right.
was an amazing experience for about a year or so.
Right, I forgot I mentioned about it. Right.
And then, so I was there, and that was amazing. I was, doing a lot of classic agency work. And then my wife's in Baltimore, so we were living in Flatbush for the first year when I was married. Then she wanted to move back to Baltimore. So after a year, I made plans to move. And I got a job at an agency in Baltimore called AMF Creative. And it was just a classic design agency.
Right.
And I was brought in as a project
Also do a lot of beautiful work. I've seen that
yeah.
stuff.
Yeah, very much so. They really do some great stuff. I mean, they really do a lot of work for the Baltimore community. Like you can
Local nonprofits and businesses.
Yeah, you can really see it. Like a lot of the places, they're proud AMF clients. It was actually really good because I had just moved to Baltimore, and then I got that role, and I got got to know a lot of people in the community right away because they're all clients of AMF, and also beyond. They deal with clients throughout the country. So that was in June of 2023. Basically, I did that up until January of this year, and then there was a little bit of a restructuring, and my position was terminated in the company. So I was out of a job in January of this year. And
So very cool. 1 second. So you were saying that you at AMF, and then you left, and then you have to figure out what your next steps are. You're thinking back to to your experience with brands. And what about brands are you specializing? Are you trying to accomplish now?
So I always enjoyed working with brands. When so my marketing experience has not been that extensive from my between Zusha and Bottom Line Marketing Group and AMF. So I was basically just a lot of the work that I've done was either from Zusha was mostly a social media standpoint, or Bottom Line was basically an agency standpoint. I never got to really work with like brands like CPG brands in a consumer sense. So I thought back to that, just thinking about things I could do myself. So I came up with a few ideas, and I just started to cold email a few companies that I was interested in. And I just started shooting ideas at them. And I basically proposed a collab idea with a full marketing campaign to go along with it. And I ended up pairing them with another company, just helping them with the collaboration process. They're a big shoe brand, partnered with a big clothing brand. Ended up working with a company called Mike's Hot Honey on...
What's it called?
Mike's Hot Honey.
Okay.
So they had a partnership program as part of their marketing strategy where they would partner up with restaurants and make them ambassadors for their hot honey, essentially. So they would kind of give them signage and give them a discounted product, and they would feature them, but it was part of their marketing move to have essentially an ambassadorship from that standpoint and like more of a seamless introduction to the customer. So I reached out to them. I worked out an arrangement with them where I would do it for kosher restaurants.
Same concept.
Same concept. I would just take it.
Very interesting.
Different.
So it sounds to me like you enjoy the business of marketing, the business of brands, not just the creative part. It's part of why I like marketing, because there's so many parts to the marketing world. It's just endless. There's design, and there's video and media and distribution and storytelling and content marketing and placement. It's a massive enterprise, which I think a lot of people don't realize. Like, you're in marketing,
Right.
it's an entire world. And the business part of marketing, to me, from everything that I do, I'm not going to say it's the least favorite part, but I'm the least involved in it. I have other people in my company who are more involved in that. It sounds to me like you enjoy that.
I guess there's the business side, and then there's the strategy side.
Okay.
So I like really all of it together, and I very much like the creative side as well. Like, what I enjoy is the strategy. I very much enjoy partnerships. I like seeing collaboration. It's very interesting to me, and I think it's something that's very much become like the go-to for many brands. Not even like in the consumer space, but like partnerships in general. You see it. It's like a very much a big thing as part of.
Give me an example of something that's out there in terms of a brand partnership play.
I think Morgan & Morgan's partnership with the UFC.
Okay.
I thought that was very smart.
So Morgan & Morgan did a partnership with UFC, which is wrestling.
So UFC is a fighting company. It's
Okay.
It's different. There's different tiers, different fighting categories, but it's basically all forms of fighting. And they did a partnership. So they're a sponsor, but there's a partnership. So Morgan & Morgan's partnership with the UFC is really an example of like a glorified sponsorship. It's not a full partnership in like the fullest extent, but I do like when brands will do that. What they're trying to do essentially is their personal injury, and they're positioning themselves carefully as a brand partner, brand ambassador of the UFC. It's very complimentary, and Morgan is also a personal injury firm that has done a very good job at making themselves very interesting.
Yes, they
and
are.
very unique.
I heard there's a Jewish guy, a Chabad guy, who's behind all of it. Did you hear that?
There is, yeah.
You know who that is? Yeah.
I don't, but
Whoever he is, I have to meet that guy.
I know, right?
It's quite, yeah. I mean, I like their billboards. Oh, they're very creative. They're extremely good at that.
it's a certain talent, no? Like if you
For sure.
you take
Reminds
law,
me of Monsales. They're also very good in that.
that's their
thing.
That's their slogan, right? Make boring things interesting.
Yeah.
If you can do that, it's easy to make a soda interesting, but like, come on, can you do a law firm?
Right, a law firm. You like the creative side, but you like seeing opportunities where brands can work with each other. People come to a marketing company at the end of the day to make money. That's the bottom line. They're coming to us. And I feel like sometimes the challenge is, because marketing is so big, you're going to reach for the tool that's nearest to you, nearest and dearest. I'm the creative content guy. Content's going to be your solution. And sometimes we forget about business moves, just collaborations, win-win. Like, so another company's already doing the heavy lifting creatively. You just have to be along for the ride, and they have to get something out of it. I love that concept. That's big picture thinking. Were you involved in anything specifically? Like, you could give me an example of that in terms of coming up with ideas. Like, you mentioned this honey company, and you were just shooting out ideas to different places. The shoe company.
It was just cold email. I mean, there's a shoe company. I can't share it. It's not public yet, but
Sure.
it's a shoe D2C brand and a clothing D2C brand. And I just saw them as being very complementary. I saw, your shoes need pants to wear, essentially. And that was how the way I framed it. I said it's very complementary, and you could work together, because I said, you're essentially you're targeting the same audience, right? So if you position yourselves together, right, then you can be the full solution, essentially. You could be the full capsule towards, that person who essentially cares enough about what they wear, but wants it to be from a convenient standpoint and a functional standpoint, rather from a more of an aesthetic standpoint. So I showed how they aligned very much on many things. They were appealing to the same consumer, and I proposed them. They loved it. They were like very much.
And how does that pan out in the real world in marketing? So that means their logo is, like, how does that manifest in real life? We're doing a partnership together. We jive. We're in the same energy. We're talking to the same people. We make sense, and let's work together. Great. What happens? What does that mean?
So that follows through with everything. That follows down to all the little pieces. So that follows through your content strategy. So if you're creating content, you're creating a storyline that's following through on your social media. So now that you've both identified that you're both targeting the same type of consumer, let's say you're targeting, this is just for an example, not for this particular case, but let's say you're targeting an individual who is very much in the tech scene. So functionality is at the forefront of everything he does. So you've both figured that out. So your content strategy follows through with that. So that means that the content you create is going to be very much appealing towards someone in that space. So if it's further partnerships from there, if let's say you're bringing in tech guys into that, into that content strategy, and you're partnering with them on another partnership, or if you're just creating content, you're creating some sort of storyline, you're creating some sort of characters that are showcasing that or putting that messaging forth, that's where it's carrying through. And then it's also carrying through in how it's put out in a visual sense.
You're saying on the billboard, you're going to show the shoes, but you'll also show the pants company. You have a pants company and a shoe company that are working together.
Right.
How do you not muddy the brand? Like, their social media is going to have, it's going to have a picture of shoes, but it'll also have a picture of pants. And how do you do it in a way that doesn't muddy the two brands, doesn't confuse consumers?
So I think it can go a few different ways, and it's a joint reel is a simplification of it, but it's essentially you're creating something that's another area of excitement for the consumer. It's like first of all, you'll have to make it limited. You have to keep the scarcity factor into it, because if it's just like a permanent partnership, then it doesn't really hold. It's like, you're just stacking things on. There has to be some sort of scarcity to it. So sometimes brands will go into they'll create in a separate account focusing on that, and build a strategy from there just on that partnership, saying it's just focusing on that. Or sometimes their focus is like, get this limited capsule, get this limited collaboration item. There's only a numbered amount of pairs that have been created for this brand, and get it. So it just keeps the excitement going. It gives people another reason to purchase a product from them, as opposed to a business relationship. If you go into a partnership with someone, you're hoping that it's long term. If you're going to a relationship from a marketing standpoint, you don't want it to be long term necessarily. You can continue it if you see that there's a lot of positive feedback from it, which happens sometimes.
Do you have an example of a long-term relationship between two brands that are feeding off each other?
Yeah, I think one of the earliest forms of collaboration is the Coca-Cola licensed some of their brands to do a collaboration with a chapstick company. And this was...
Chapstick?
Yeah, I think it was a chapstick or lip balm, one of those. I don't know which brand it was exactly. And they saw a lot of success in it, and I think it's been running for...
Really?
For
like,
30
what's the
years.
collaboration? The lip gloss sells Coca-Cola. You get a free Coke for every 3 lip glosses that you buy?
It's just Coke flavored.
Oh, it's the flavoring of the lip gloss.
Yeah. I think they started off as a limited edition, and then they saw it did well in the market, and they just made it a permanent item. And you see the same thing, like if you see a Duncan Hines Hershey's collaboration, that's a collaboration that's...
They use Hershey's chocolate in their cookies?
Yeah, and they put it out for marketing purposes, and if they see the market reacts well to it, they'll just keep it out there, because they understand that someone who likes Hershey's will pick up a Duncan Hines box, because both are meeting in the middle. So
that's interesting, because I don't think it's so common. Like, I'm trying to think, let's say in the frum world,
Not common in the film.
Not common at all.
Yeah.
Is that something that's an opportunity? Do you think you're seeing that there's more opportunities? There should be more of that. Like if it's
Yeah.
working in the general world, it should be working in our world too.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. I think partnerships have to be looked at from all angles. Just like you partner with an influencer or you would partner with a content creator. You partner with a content creator you expect to have a long-standing relationship with. Like I'm not talking like a one-off, but someone who you really want to be part of this brand. People have to think of the same way with partnerships in general. So from brand to brand, and think about how could we build a relationship where there's a synergy between both, where people connect the two, or not even, it doesn't have to be long-standing, but for a period of time, for 4 months, we want them to link us both together.
Very interesting. Yeah, so we're talking about partnerships, and we're talking about examples. We were saying in the frum world, business world right now, it's not so common, but there's opportunity there. Maybe that's on the table that people are not thinking about. One great example, which came to mind for you, and I think for me as well, is LBA, right? So, Shimon, which I had him here on the podcast, he's really, really talented and skilled at this, and seeing opportunities for brands to work together. Example, he's doing a big giveaway now. All of his partner companies, our sponsors, are all going to be sponsoring part of the giveaway for something that they're good at. So if it's a restaurant sponsor, they're sponsoring a free restaurant. If they're, we're here at Westwood, Westwood's going to be sponsoring a free month of an office.
Right.
And that's a brilliant example of a win-win. Everybody wins. The collective as a whole wins, and every individual partner wins. So I think that's an interesting point they're bringing out. Something for people like, people in marketing or in general, people in businesses. I think especially when you have your own business, you're so used to being the pioneer and being the guy that's just pulling and tugging the train that you don't stop and think sometimes that there's opportunities. Everyone here is going in the same direction. How can we pull together? I mean, I'll give you an example. I think this podcast itself, to me, is an example of partnerships, where I'm bringing, someone asked me, they're like, I just spoke to Man Sales, right? I was speaking to him before. And someone said, isn't it your competition? And I said, no, there's no competition. First of all, I believe, there's enough, Hashem has enough business for everybody. But I believe that everybody wins when you work together. So that's an interesting thought. What are you most excited about in terms of marketing right now, and where do you see things going?
What I like most about marketing right now is that in an interesting way, it's the most challenging, because I like the challenge that you have to really think from so many different ends when you're developing a strategy. It used to be a lot more simple. You were working in the Mad Men era. Someone came to you and said, make an ad.
Sketch, right?
That was
it.
And
you put up a thing, right, the New York Times, and that was done. The TV ad, 30 seconds.
Right, and that was it. And it was like, okay, we're good. And then, they said make a brand, and it was like, okay. Like it's interesting to me. We're in like the nostalgic era where everyone's nostalgic about everything. So they create, everyone's trying to mimic, let's say, the old menus, the old vintage type of branding. So they're doing it intentionally. When they were creating that kind of stuff in the 1940s, 50s, they were just doing it.
Right.
That's all there was.
That's what it was, exactly. You didn't have the nostalgic. Maybe they had nostalgia from like the 1800s. I don't know.
I'm not sure.
Right. You have to go back there and check. But it is a great point, like you say, and something that I come across every single day from a marketing company. It's so broad, the world of marketing. Like a client comes in and says, okay, let's do a campaign. Right. Even in the firm world, what does a campaign mean? Just in terms of creative, and then in terms of distribution. It's like endless. The world is endless. Do you want to do, WhatsApp statuses? Are we doing video content? Are we doing Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, Twitter? Are we doing email marketing? Are we doing billboards, electronic billboards today? Are we doing print? Where are we doing print? Local magazines, national magazines? There's no longer one national magazine. There's 50 of them, right? Are we doing, email blasts and buying email lists? Are we doing Facebook ads, Google search, SEO? It doesn't end in terms of what you could do. And then, as a marketer, I feel sometimes it's like it just makes my stomach tight because I have that cries. Someone's giving us a lot of money. It all has to make sense. It can't just be wasted. At least that's there's no guarantees of anything, but at least that's to try to make sense. And then partnerships, what you're bringing to the table is also a fascinating thing to add into the mix, and something I'm going to be thinking about more after this conversation. So anyway, I really appreciate you coming down today, and I look forward to hearing more of your journey and where things end up and being in touch. And we'll take it from there.
That's it. Well, thanks for having me on. It was a pleasure.
Okay, absolutely.
Really enjoyed the conversation. Thank you.
Okay, amazing.